Okay, I'm Chris Avina, and welcome to another edition of American Outdoor News. Today's guest is the recipient of 2 Grammy Awards, 4 CMAs, 7 multi-platinum albums, and he's charted more than 40 times. Will you please welcome Mr. Travis Tritt?
How you
Travis,
doing
thank
this
you for
morning?
taking the time. It's a pleasure to
It's
see you.
really my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, you're currently touring. You came out with a new album, the first time in a while, right?
Yeah, we released a new album back earlier in the summer. It's the first studio album that I've done in about 14 years. It's called Set in Stone, and that all came about basically through my manager. My manager and I started working together about 2.5 years ago. And one of the first things that he said to me when we started working together is like, you've had a great career and you've had a lot of success, but he said, I still think that you've got a lot of great music left in you. I think you've got songs that you can write. I think you've still got something to say. And he said, I would love to see you go in the studio and do a new album, just if not only to feed your loyal fans, but also to draw in possibly newer people that are not as familiar with your catalog. So I thought that was a great idea. And then we got hooked up with a guy by the name of Dave Cobb, who produced the album. He produces all of the albums on people like Chris Stapleton, on people like Sturgill Simpson. Just the list goes on and on. And he was just absolutely wonderful to work with. And after being out of the studio, I was a little bit hesitant about going back in because I know things have changed a lot in the last 14 years with how people record music and how music is produced. But he basically put my mind at ease very quickly. He said, here's the way I do it. I take a full band in. We all are sitting in the same room when we record, and everything is played live. And I want you to record as many of your live vocals as possible while we're laying the tracks down. Well, that was perfect for me because that's the way I've always done it. Ever since I started recording back in the late 80s, that's the way I've always done it. So it was really a refreshing thing to hear. And I could not be more pleased with that whole process. It was just an absolute joy to do this album.
Well, your catalog is endless. It's classic.
Well, thank you.
You're a bona fide rock star.
Well, thank you.
Now, it's funny. I had Ted Nugent in here for my last cover, covering the rock and roll section. You're covering the country section. This is really an honor for me. I appreciate it.
Truly my pleasure.
So you have been, you were in Georgia. I mean, did you grow up in the outdoors? Were you an outdoor family?
My dad, he didn't hunt as much as some of my uncles and my grandfather did, but he hunted occasionally. He liked to hunt, things like rabbits and squirrels and stuff like that. And he enjoyed that. He enjoyed the outdoors though, all my young life. I mean, he enjoyed just being outdoors and he encouraged me and my entire family to do things outdoors as well. And my first though experience with a real hunt, what I would refer to as a real hunt, was when I was about 12 years old. And my uncle took me deer hunting for the very first time, he and my cousin. And back in those days, it was a lot different than it is now. Back in those days,
that's a fact.
first of all, in Georgia, you could walk 50 yards into any woods and you would hear the sound of quail. You would stir up a covey of wild quail. Meanwhile, if you so much as saw not a deer, but a deer track, you went back and told everybody in town, because there weren't many deer around this area back then. And it's funny because to me, because now, you know, almost 50 years later, it's exactly the opposite of that.
Mhm.
We've had so many predators that have been brought in that wild quail are practically non-existent in this part of the world.
Yeah.
But deer are everywhere. And back in those days too, there was no such thing as leased land to hunt on.
Mhm.
You basically, there were several um, um, reserves or preserves that were public land that you could hunt deer on in Georgia, and that was obviously it came to be kind of a dangerous situation in some cases because you never knew exactly who was in the woods with you. So once we started um, seeing more deer and also having more leased land come available to us where you could go in and go on a lease with a small group of hunters, all people that you knew and
Mhm.
that you trusted in the woods. That became really kind of an eye-opening experience for me as far as deer hunting was concerned, because it changed the whole face of it and it made it a lot more enjoyable. Um, Plus, back in those days too, there was no such thing as um, pre-built deer stands. You know, most of the
Yep.
stands that we used back in the day were those old climbing stands. You know that I've nearly fallen out of. I don't know how many trees over the
Yeah, those
years.
climbers scare the hell out of me. I like a
Oh
little rope.
man, absolutely. And plus, I've frozen my ass off. You know, on numerous deer stands. So there came a point, probably about um, probably about 20, 25 years ago, where I just basically just lost interest in deer hunting at that particular time. And of course, I loved anything outdoors, hunting, fishing, any of that kind of stuff. I still wanted to do it, but I just wanted to find something that was a little bit more, um, something that I enjoyed a little bit more. And I was introduced by my father-in-law to upland bird hunting,
Sure.
quail. He actually ran a quail plantation down in Central Florida for years, and he invited me to come along and go on quail hunts with him and my brothers-in-law. And man, it was just like I enjoyed it, everything about it. I enjoyed the hunting, but more than anything else, I loved watching really good trained dogs work in the field. That
Yeah,
was just a thrill for me, and
that's
it
an art.
still is, absolutely. So I got started with that, and then later on, I started. Hank Williams Jr. actually took me on my first turkey hunt many years ago, and I was hooked immediately on that. Loved to turkey hunt.
Yeah.
Shortly thereafter, a good friend of mine, who is an avid hunter, took me on my first duck hunt up in Missouri, uh, very close to the Mississippi River. And I was hooked on that as well. Went on pheasant hunts with him as well in South Dakota for every single year for probably the last 10 or 12 years. I've been in South Dakota for opening day of pheasant season. It's just something that I really, really enjoy. So all of those different types of hunting. And of course, I do wild boar hunting, and I had the privilege a few years ago to go to South Africa and hunt plains game there
That's
with my
exciting.
wife. Yeah, my wife was actually born in Nairobi,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, her father was ex Green Beret, and when he left the armed forces after Vietnam, he and uh, my wife's uncle, they moved to Africa to pour concrete for all of the runways, for all of the airports in all over South Africa,
Wow.
um, Botswana, Nairobi, um, everywhere that you can think of across the continent of Africa. And then they would pour during the week, they would pour concrete. And then on weekends, most of the people that were working with them um, were also skinners, trackers.
Sure.
So they would take all of them out on the weekend and they would go on safari for the weekend. And every time that I would get around, my wife and I have been married for uh, about 20, almost 25 years. And every time I would get around her father or her uncle at Christmas time or, around the holidays, they would talk about those experiences in Africa and how they would like to go back one more time before they died. So in 2006, uh, my wife and I put together a trip that included she and I and her uncle and her father. And we went over to Africa and stayed for about 2 weeks and just had a wonderful, wonderful time hunting plains.
Africa's like a sportsman's paradise, you know?
It really is. It was just absolutely wonderful.
I saw you took a gorgeous sable there.
I did. I did. As a
That
matter
is,
of fact, that particular hunt, uh, just one guy that was who was a dear friend of mine. He and I were the only two that wanted to go after a sable, so we had to leave the rest of our party behind, and we had to travel as far north as you could go and still be in South Africa. We were right up on the edge of the
Zimbabwe.
Sahara Desert,
Oh,
and
wow.
we were less than 100 miles from where John Wayne filmed Hatari back in the
Wow.
'60s. Or so it was just all around, man. Some of the greatest memories that I have in my life was being on that hunt. That was just an absolute blast for me.
I think every hunter should experience hunting Africa at least one time in their life. It's an
I
amazing
agree.
experience.
It is.
Even the big game hunts, there's this perception of hunting elephant where, you know, the anti-hunters and whatnot. It's not the hunters, it's the poachers.
It's the poachers, absolutely. That's the biggest threat. I mean, obviously, in any economy, the amount of money that hunters put into the economy to go over there and be able to hunt these animals, and also the fact that they are very limited on the amount of animals that they are able to harvest.
Mhm.
It's done in a very conservative way. And so the biggest threat is not from the hunters, the hunting society. The biggest threat is from poachers, because poachers come in and they don't care. They don't have a limit on how many animals they
No,
kill.
they're not worried about a license. They're just coming in and killing and
Ab-
taking the tusks. And, you know,
Absolutely.
it's funny because people don't realize that um, one elephant will feed hundreds of people. And
Absolutely.
when there's a confirmed kill, they come from everywhere. They
Oh,
butcher that
absolutely.
thing down to nothing. There's just a blood spot on the floor. They take the bones and all.
Absolutely. And they pretty much do that with every animal. I mean, all the plains game that we killed, which was fabulous meat.
Yeah.
We ate it every night while we were there. But uh, everything that we took in, there was a large portion of that we just donated to the local folks there. And once again, they were extremely appreciative because they um, that is a very poor continent.
Yeah.
And these people, they really appreciated not only the financial assistance that hunting provides for them, but also the meat that it provides. It feeds a
The
lot of people
nutrition and
there.
sustenance. That's true.
100%.
You know what bothered
100%.
me? About a year or so ago, I saw them burning. They confiscated a large amount of ivory, and
Hmm.
they burned thousands of pounds of elephant ivory. Why not put
Such a
that out to the
waste.
marketplace? Flood the marketplace with what they call confiscated, bring the pricing way down so the demand, uh, is satisfied, and that'll take care of the poaching.
It just seems like a huge waste to me. I mean, for any animals to be, I've always believed in eating what I kill,
I agree.
and I've always believed in um, trying to do everything in my power to make sure that not only that we're able to go in and pay for our licenses and pay for all the different things to help the build up the environment for these animals to thrive in, but also to give us an opportunity to teach people about the conservation of the
Mhm.
land, so that these animals can thrive, and that there will be hunting for generations to come. I mean, that is primarily I think every hunter that I've ever met, that's primarily their take on things. And
Mhm.
they're some of the best environmentalists, I think, in the world, because they love the land. They love the experience of teaching their children and their grandchildren how to go out and hunt and fish, but also they realize that in order for that to continue on, that we have to really be stewards of the land, and we really have to be um, careful with how we make sure that these animals are going to thrive, that there's going to be plenty of them. Uh, we are all very, very conscious of that, and I think that's one of the things that's probably the most misunderstood about hunters in general.
Well, that's the, part of the Pittman-Robertson Act. That's a
Hmm.
self-imposed tax.
Sure.
Every gun, every license, every round of ammunition, there's a self-imposed tax that goes directly towards conservation.
100%. And that's one of the reasons why I have never begrudged a single dollar that I have spent for a hunting license in my entire life, because I know where that money is going.
Sure.
And it's going back into the environment, it's going back into conservation, it's going back into making sure that we are protecting the land and taking care of the land so that we can pass this wonderful experience of hunting down to our kids and our grandchildren for generations to come.
So at what age did you introduce your kids to the outdoors and hunting?
From the very beginning, I live on a 75-acre farm in Georgia, and I bought it in 1992. And my wife and I met in 1995, and so we started having our first child was born in 1997, and we um, I wanted to make sure that all of the things that I loved that I could do on my own property without ever having to leave. So I had when I first bought the property, there was a small little pond about maybe, I don't know, an acre and a half. It was about 6 inches deep. It was full of water moccasins and turtles. And so we came in and we dredged it out, and we stocked it, and we made it bigger. We made it about 3.5 acres, and we stocked it with largemouth bass, channel catfish, and
Wow.
bluegill. And so anytime I wanted to, I could go out and start, cast a line and go fishing. And I basically started teaching my children, all three of them, um, how to do that, and teaching them a love for that, um, from the time they were just toddlers. And
Sure.
they've all grown up, um, enjoying that. They've enjoyed, going out, and we'll do clay shooting, in our back pasture.
That's always fun.
Yeah, it's always great. But getting them, um, to love the land and to love the outdoors as much as I do, and in love, and also the love for all shooting sports, all hunting, all fishing, all those different things. So they've all been taught that, from a very, very early age. And it wasn't just me. I mean, my wife, obviously, growing up as her father being an avid hunter, avid fisherman. So she grew up in that same type of environment. All her family did as well.
Does she hunt as
So,
well?
oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, she went with me. As a matter of fact, I hate to even talk about it because I think she might be a better shot than me. When we went to Africa together, she was she was unbelievable. Just in fantastic, fantastic shot. So
You
yes, she
know,
hunts.
I think inherently women are better shots
Yeah,
because they have more focus than we do.
I think
Uh,
so.
they're more teachable. They'll sit and listen to
Yes,
instructions. Guys have egos.
exactly.
They,
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
can't learn anything from you. I already know how to shoot. Well, you know,
Exactly.
I've been hunting with a lot of women and they outshot me, and I'm not embarrassed to admit it.
No, absolutely. Me either. Uh, the fact is that uh, us guys have a serious problem sometimes taking instructions. That's why we tear the instructions up on anything we're trying to put together. Whether it be a new outdoor grill or
Yep.
whatever it may be.
So there's so
It's
much
like,
moving
oh no,
parts.
we
Don't
don't need
worry about it.
don't
It's
need these
extra.
instructions, man. Throw those away. I got this.
It's funny. Fact.
Uh,
True.
that's a fact.
Now, do you train your own dogs or do you just use the outfitters dogs?
We use the outfitters dogs. My oldest son, um, uh, got a chocolate lab puppy about 3 years ago, and he has been doing a little bit of training with that dog. My youngest son, who's about to be 18 next month,
Wow.
um, has a bird dog that he has worked with a little bit. But most of the time when we go on these quail hunts, they have such fantastic dogs at most of these plantations where we hunt, that we just use those dogs, and they are
Yeah,
absolutely wonderful to watch.
it's a lot of work training
It
a
really is.
hunting dog. It takes a
It
lot of
really
time
is.
and a lot of money.
Exactly. Exactly.
So basically for you, if it's flying, it's dying.
Well, yeah, that's pretty much the way it goes. And we, like I said, we love, I mean, all of my children, man, bacon wrapped quail, done on a smoker is probably one of the things that they love the most. They love, obviously, pheasant. They eat all kinds of wild game. They love it. Deer. They love venison.
Bacon
Uh,
makes everything taste better.
Absolutely, man. You can wrap shoe leather in bacon, and it would taste good.
Well, we have a
But
cooking section in the magazine. So if you or your boys want to send over a recipe, I'll be happy to
absolutely,
use that as well.
you bet. Absolutely, I'll be glad to do that.
Now, I'm gonna throw a date out to you and let me know what that date means to you. Uh, August 14th, 1875.
August 14th, 1875.
Has to do with something you owned.
August 14th, 1875. Man, I'm stumped.
you owned a hunting cabin that you sold, and it was haunted.
Yes. Yeah. But that wasn't 1875.
Oh, no?
No.
My
No, that
research
hunting
is
cabin.
faulty.
No, that cabin was actually, it was up in North Georgia on a lake up there. And it was about 8 years old when I bought it. It was, and it wasn't a hunting cabin. It was just like um, uh, basically a recreational cabin.
Uh,
This particular lake up in North Georgia, most of the people that go up there, they have like second homes all around the lake. It's not a huge lake, but it's got about 300 something miles of shoreline, and most of the people that go up there that have those houses or cabins or log homes or whatever around the lake, they just use those primarily for recreation during the summertime. So yeah, but it was definitely haunted. And I was one of those that really didn't believe in that sort of thing too much, but that particular cabin made a believer out of out of me.
my cousin bought a plantation in Alabama,
Uh-huh.
and same thing. He swears it's haunted. He's had a median on the property, and it turns out that one of the ghosts, I guess you call him,
Hmm.
a former slave from the
Hmm.
plantation, and a young girl who lived on the plantation. So
Yeah.
he would tell me some amazing stories. I'm like,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
I don't know if I want to live there.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just, and I've had people that have asked me because I sold that uh, log home a few years ago, and they asked me, "Well, did you sell it because of the haunting?" And actually, no, because for the last few years, just prior to selling it, um, the paranormal activity had really almost stopped completely. But it was one of those things where I stay on the road so much and so busy, and obviously the summer months are the busiest time for me. So we were basically finding out that I was only available to go up there like, 4 or 5 days a year.
Wow,
So
so
it wasn't something that we didn't get a chance to use very often. Um, so we ended up letting it go. But, the more that's been several years ago, and the more time that I spend um, without having that place up there, because the lake is just absolutely beautiful.
yeah.
The more I'm thinking that maybe someday, who knows, maybe someday I may buy another place up there.
Well, it's always more relaxing. There's something about the tranquility of being out in the woods or on the lake.
100%.
Or I just lost my
Yes.
place. We had a club up in New York. We leased 600 acres on a nice big lake, 60-acre lake. Uh, the owner just sold the property. We were there 20 years. So
Oh,
we
wow.
sold it for $2 million. And
Yeah.
we weren't going to come up with $2 million to buy the
Yeah.
property. I don't even want to
Exactly.
stay in New York anymore.
Exactly. I understand. I understand completely.
But I have a gun question for you. Uh,
Sure.
what does the Second Amendment mean to you?
The Second Amendment means, first of all, that we are able to own the guns um, that we use for all of the hunting that we do. And above and beyond that, I think everybody should have the God-given right to be able to protect themselves, defend themselves, against um, any kind of intruder or anyone that would be a threat, possibly do harm to you or your family,
Mhm.
and also against tyranny. I mean, that was. I look at what's going on in Australia right now, and I seriously doubt that any of the experiences that they're having there with the government basically just overreaching and all these government draconian rules of basically keeping people locked up in their houses, and people don't have the opportunity to fight back anymore because years ago they gave up their guns in Australia. And I think
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest reasons why they're seeing their country being overrun, and they're defenseless against that.
Yeah.
The general public is defenseless against that. So the Second Amendment was put in place, obviously, um, to protect people against tyrannical government and give them the opportunity to be able to fight back. And that's how this country was founded. And it's, once again, it's something that we absolutely have to preserve in order to protect our freedom and our way of life and our families.
Well, this administration is coming after our Second Amendment right pretty hard. But in my opinion, Joe Biden forfeited that right when he equipped the Taliban with over 600,000 small arms, armored vehicles, Black Hawk helicopters, planes. He basically fully equipped their army. So to me, he forfeited that right to try and question our right to bear arms.
Well, think about this. This administration has basically said by their actions that it's okay for the Taliban to have all of these armored vehicles and all of these guns and all these different things, but your local police departments can't have them.
Yep.
And that is absolutely completely backwards. It's I just don't understand the mentality behind it. But once again, if we're going to continue to have a country, the United States has got to preserve our freedoms, all the freedoms that were not given to us by government, but they were given to us by God.
Yep.
And they are documented in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And so, once again, we have to stand strong, and we have to fight back any kind of tyranny that would take those rights and those freedoms away from us.
100%. Well, in closing, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for bringing the Eagles back together.
Man,
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I've had a lot of people that have tried to give me credit for that, and I've never really taken credit for it, simply because of the fact that the way that came about, in the mid '90s, one of the record labels came up with the idea of doing a tribute album to the Eagles, and they wanted all of the current hit makers in country music to each do a cover of an Eagles song. And I think I was one of the last ones that was invited in, because when I started being asked, well, what song do you want to do? Well, I'd like to do Desperado. Well, no, Clint Black's already doing that one. Or I'd like to do this song. Well, no, somebody else is already doing that. So I was kind of running out of options, and my attorney at the time suggested to me that I do Take It Easy, because that was their first #1 hit for the Eagles. And so I said, is that song taken? And they said, no, it's not taken. I said, well, great. So I went in and recorded it. And then a few months later, they sent me the entire album. And I sat and listened to it and just thought, man, everybody's performance on this album was just so great. And the thing that was special to me about it was the fact that the Eagles had become the soundtrack of my life. The first time I did a lot of things in my life, the first time I ever drove my father's car without him being with me, the first time that I ever went on a date, first time I ever kissed a girl, there was Eagles music playing in the background. And so it became literally like the soundtrack of my life. And so after we completed the album, I get a call one day from the Eagles management office. And they said, hey, we're going to we want your single to be the first single off of this album. And I was honored. I was
Wow.
shocked. You know, it's like, man, there's so many great performances. And they said, we want you to be the first. And to promote it, we want you to do a video. And I was like, man, that's going to have to be a heck of a video to stand up to how good this album really is. And they said, well, what do you have in mind? And I'm just off the top of my head, I said something like, I don't know, maybe we should get the Eagles back together. And I just kind of laughed. And there was dead silence on the other end of the phone. And then a few days after that, apparently somebody took me seriously, because they called back from the manager called back and said, look, I'm going to give you Don Henley's phone number, and I'm going to give you Glenn Fry's phone number. And if you can get them to agree to be a part of this video, then we'll do it. And so we did. We called both of them, and both of them said the same thing. They said, well, if the other one does it, I'll do it. And so we knew that once we had Don and Glenn, that the rest of the Eagles would probably come in as well, and they all did. And so we ended up just shooting that video in a little cantina restaurant in Los Angeles in December of that year. And at the end of the video, they said they had a little bandstand set up over in the corner, and they had all the amps and a drum kit and everything. They said, we just want you guys to just act like you're playing along with the song. So I pick up a guitar and plug in. All the guys plugged in their instruments. Don sat behind the drum kit, and I just start playing the beginning of Rocky Mountain Way. Bump to bump to bump, bump, bump.
Great song.
And the band joined in, and I'm sharing a microphone. I'm this close to Joe Walsh singing Rocky Mountain Way. And that was the first song that the Eagles had played together in over like 14, 15 years. And I got to be an Eagle for a day. So it was just for me, it was one of those things that I think just kind of happened by accident, but you know, everything happens for a reason. And the timing of that was just perfect. So I don't take a lot of credit for getting them back together. I was just glad to be a part of it and glad to be involved in. And of course, that was kind of the beginning of the Hell Freezes Over tour.
One of my favorite albums.
Took place,
I saw that tour.
Yeah, another year later. So yeah, it was a great experience for me. And you know, I managed to maintain a really good friendship with both Glenn Fry right up until he passed away, and also with Don Henley as well. So I'm just honored that I had that opportunity to work with those guys, because they meant so much to me musically.
That's awesome. They had a huge impact on everybody's life, because like you, we're the same age. It was always on the radio. They were always around.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And every song they did was just fabulous. And their music spanned all different genres. I mean, there was a lot of the early stuff that had a very country um, influence. And of course, you know, I think one of the best albums I've ever heard in my life was the Hotel California album. It's still one of my all-time favorites.
That was gold. Well,
Yes.
technically, but it
Yes.
was gold.
Yes.
But all right, I appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today. And if where can we find your new album?
It's available pretty much everywhere. All the streaming services are carrying it. Apple Music, Pandora, um, all Spotify, all of those. You can find the album there. It's called Set in Stone. And also like Walmart's, Amazon, all those different people that carry it as well. We are just now coming out with vinyl. We're going to do a limited edition vinyl on the album. So I'm very excited about that. And also you can find the album and also you can find out all of my updated tour information at travistritt.com. And I encourage people to go there and check that out and check it out often because we are constantly adding more and more dates to our schedule, not only for 2021, but also into 2022 and beyond. So go check it out.
Great. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.